This will be the first video in this video series regarding my extended inquiry project. The overall question of focus is, what is the function and significance of pain tolerance? The specific topic I'll be discussing in this video is my background and initial interest in pain tolerance, along with a look into the involvement of fighters and the mentality and purpose behind pain tolerance. To begin, I'll dive into my background regarding the subject and why this topic spiked my interest. Throughout my freshman, junior, and senior years of high school, I was on the wrestling team. Wrestling is a combat sport involving grappling and gaining an advantageous position on your opponent to either win by ending with more points or through pinning your opponent, having their shoulder blades held on the mat. Wrestling is widely considered to be one of the most physically and mentally challenging sports in the world, and this is certainly something that I can attest to. As a combat sport, wrestling requires you to constantly be physically imposing and dominant. The nature of the sport itself involves a lot of impacts and uncomfortable positions. Beyond the inherent elements of the sport, though, you have the pain of actually grinding to succeed as a wrestler. Some of my wrestling practices, whether it be through my school or wrestling club, were the most difficult physical experiences of my life. They pushed my strength, cardiovascular endurance, speed, and mentality to the absolute limits. The harder wrestling practices embodied the concept of pain quite well. To add to this, the harsh contact nature of the sport leads athletes to being hurt a lot of the time. I remember having bruised legs, an aching back, and hurt knees quite frequently. I even have a completely different formed right ear now because the cartilage has reformed due to cauliflower ear from wrestling. All in all, wrestling embraces pain as part of the sport, and this inevitability is described and substantiated in Wrestling Tough by Mike Chapman when he says, "All wrestlers have experienced pain at various levels, mentally and physically. Often they are tied together. Wrestlers must deal with countless injuries ranging from twisted fingers to broken noses, from damaged knees to separated shoulders. No athlete who has been in the sport for long will escape an injury of some type. They come in all forms and shapes and in various degrees of discomfort and seriousness." This quote speaks to me because I am all too familiar with dealing with the pain of wrestling, along with seeing my teammates go through it as well. In addition to my background in wrestling, there's another reason as to why I am interested in researching this topic, and it has to do with pushing the human limits. My years of wrestling are, at least for the time being, behind me. But since I've been an athlete in some form or fashion all my life, I am focusing on a new sport currently, which is powerlifting. Powerlifting is a contest of strength in which competitors max out their squat, bench press, and deadlift to see who has lifted the most total weight between the three lifts at the end of the competition. It is a test of absolute static strength, and over the years, the sport has evolved. It is a display of people pushing their bodies as far as they can go to lift as much as they can within their respective weight class. Participation in this sport, along with other things, has made me intrigued in the limits of the human body because it truly is amazing what we are capable of given time and effort. That is another reason why, when I saw this topic on the class Padlet of pain tolerance, it hooked me in. To extrapolate upon the topic of pain tolerance in combat sports, I will now be discussing the role of pain tolerance in MMA. As PhD Eddie O'Connor says in his article, Pain Tolerance in Sport, an athlete's ability to tolerate pain is essential to success, and this could not be more true in the sport of MMA. MMA, or mixed martial arts, is essentially the ultimate combat sport with all fighting disciplines combined into one sport, where the winner is decided either by submission, knockout, or decision. It incorporates striking, kicking, submission grappling, and wrestling. It is safe to say that you undergo a ton of damage and pain in the sport. Fighters need to acclimate to this to be able to survive all the rounds that they undergo without losing. Like wrestling, pain is an inevitability in the sport, and it must be dealt with. There's an example of how a specific discipline within MMA approaches pain tolerance, and it is seen through the article, "How do MMA fighters deal with pain?" Through the quote, "In Muay Thai, The practitioners take an interesting approach. For example, you'll see them striking the heavy bag with their shins and other areas. This toughens up that part of the body, makes it stronger, and also increases your pain tolerance. Part of this has to do with killing nerve endings in the shin area, which is why it's slightly controversial. This shows the grueling lengths in which fighters are willing to go to have an advantage with a higher pain tolerance. In addition to this, stretching can make fighters more flexible, which makes certain positions less painful, submissions less dangerous, and injuries less common. Anti-inflammatory and anti-pain medication can help as well. MMA athletes are viewed as some of the toughest people in the world, partially due to their pain tolerance. And in the genetic elite in the sport, they can even seem inhuman at times with what they can withstand. This section can be summed up with a quote from Jack Pennant in his article Pain in Martial Arts and Boxing, where he says, "Pain in martial arts and boxing, which can range from moderate to severe, is commonplace during training. And it seems obvious to me that pain is to fighters as flour is to bakers. Pain is the currency that tells you that your technique, or the technique being done to you, is working. After all, one of the primary goals of this training is to dissuade an opponent from attacking you or to avoid the attack." Now we are going to veer from the focus on combat sports and look more at the purpose and mental aspects behind pain. Although pain is typically perceived as a physical experience, your mind and how you cognitively approach pain and pain tolerance has genuine benefits and effects. This idea is academically built upon and discussed in more detail in Phil White's article, Mental Resilience and Pain Tolerance for Endurance Athletes, and can be seen in the quote, "Interestingly, the authors noted that increased pain tolerance wasn't merely a physical phenomenon, but was closely tied to participants' mental approach. Those who had a greater fear of pain and a lower tolerance to it, had a lower tolerance to it, meaning that the manifestation of how much they hurt was a self-fulfilling prophecy. The researchers also noted that those who displayed a higher level of grit got further through physical tests than those who weren't as determined. This excerpt displays that how someone thinks affects their ability to withstand pain. It is largely the fear and the lack of mental strength that led people to not being able to tolerate much pain. This all reminds me of the famous Seneca quote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality," which means that we can perceive things as worse than they actually are and have a worse experience, in this case in a literal sense through pain. To build on this, we can take a quick backtrack to the wrestling section of this video. There is definitely something to be said about the mentality of wrestlers and how tough they are, and this quote from Wrestling Tough by Mike Chapman solidifies that idea when he says, "He was not only a slick and exciting wrestler, but also a mentally tough and determined one. He had wrestled extremely tough when the need arose, blocking out the physical pain and mental doubts that must have accompanied him on the mat to perform at his highest level. This shows that mental fortitude and grit allow one to work through and put aside things that cause pain, even high levels of pain. The testament of the connection between mental and physical toughness can truly be seen time and time again in wrestling." To conclude, we can briefly discuss the purpose of pain tolerance. Your pain tolerance is the threshold for what degree of pain you can handle. You need to have pain tolerance for your body to be able to communicate damage or biological dangers to you. Increasing this pain tolerance not only pushes you physically, but mentally, and displays the wonders of the human body and the human spirit. Pain tolerance is a brutal part of being, and this can be seen through combat sports, as I previously mentioned. Pain and pain tolerance are truly deeply human. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video where I will be looking at historical, cultural, and genetic perspectives of pain tolerance.